Welcome to the morning after CFFL edition, week 7. Alright, today we will look at, we'll finish our going deep segment and we reveal for the first time the FCS rankings, which are completely pointless more or less. They really don't hold any significance, but they will be, used to kind of talk about where teams stand. So let's get into the action from the week that was here in week 7. First of all, this week we saw the Bruisers take down Team LBM. The Bruisers now have won 5 in a row. Team LBM had no one scoring double figures, while Shane Vereen and Matt Forte combined for 34.5 points to win the game by themselves. Also this week we saw the Garbage Men take down the Dingos in a bit of a mild upset, 60 to 55.5. Garbage Men moved to 4-3. Same with the Dingos. Andrew Luck continued his good season with 15.5 points. Aaron Rodgers at 18 for the Dingos. This week we also saw the Badgers take down the Gargoyles, 60 to 53.5. Badgers moved to 5-2. Gargoyles fall to 53.5. To 3-4, sorry. Golden Tate had a huge day for the Badgers with 14.5 points. Tony Roma had his best game of the year with 17.5 points. The Bone Storm manhandled the Cardinals, 81 to 52. The Bone Storm moved to 3-4, the same as the Cardinals. Carson Palmer had 13 points. Demarius Thomas had 21.5 for the Bone Storm to pick up a crucial win. In Rogers We Trust took down the Donkeys 58 to 40.5. The big trade that happened this past week involving Ben Tate and Mike Wallace. Mike Wallace did have a touchdown. Ben Tate for the Gargoyles unfortunately did not. For the Gargoyles anyway. Donkeys though weren't able to pick up the win even with the big trade. Cam Newton did have 10 points. DeMarco Murray continued his pretty good season with 13 points. And finally this week it was the upset of the week. The Kongs took down the Horn Dogs 74 to 50. Peyton Manning, who did some other good things this week, had 23 points. Russell Wilson, who really did not have a very good week, but a good fantasy week with 27 points. That was the week that was. Like I mentioned, there was a trade this past week. The Gargoyles and Donkeys made a trade. Ben Tate for Mike Wallace. Wasn't really a trade that had any effect on this week, but we'll see down the road. Let's take a look at the player of the week. May not have been the top fantasy performer, but a guy who had a pretty good week. Peyton Manning had 23 points, 4 touchdowns, and 318 yards passing. The 4 touchdowns was important because he needed 2 to tie Favre's record, and then he broke it then. He now has 510 career passing touchdowns, on his way to possibly being the greatest quarterback of all time, if he's not already there. Walk of shame this week, and not for their fault, but the Buffalo Bills running backs were both hurt this week. Early on in the game, Fred Jackson left, followed by C.J. Spiller breaking his collarbone, and he is out for the year. Jackson's out anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks. So not a good week to be a Bills fan that way, although they did win. And a not good time to have those players on your team, Black Dingoes and In Rogers We Trust. Griff's gripe this week takes a look at some bad math. Put this one in the genius file. Cowboys running back Joseph Randle was caught stealing a tester bottle of cologne and a 2-pack of underwear estimated at about $120. However, Randle was fined this week's pay of $29,000 for the incident. I believe that this embarrassing incident could have been avoided if Jerry Jones only paid his employees a fair wage. Joseph Randle is the victim of a corrupt system. Griff, you did miss out on the probably most interesting part of this story, and that is that Randle then landed a endorsement deal in Dallas for the theft. For cologne. So I guess if you steal stuff, you can get a deal, an endorsement deal, which is nice. Maybe I should try that around here. Probably is not going to work well if I steal anything from my work or anyone else. Reisner, probably not good for you to do that either. The federal people might not like that too much. But yeah, that's an interesting. I can't believe that happened in Dallas, but that's Dallas for you. Next up, Yo Bitch, the top free agent pickup of the week. Denard Robinson, was the top free agent pickup. 127 yards rushing, 1 touchdown and 13 points. An actual Jacksonville running back did something, and according to his head coach, he will now be the starter the rest of the way. So we will see what Denard is able to do the rest of the way. Now for the going deep segment. First of all, we'll take a look at Bites' Badgers. Currently the top team in the league. Needs maybe a wide receiver 3. Crabtree and Mike Evans are not bad. At all, but can always improve somewhere. His depth is at running back: Lamar Miller, Brendan Oliver, Rashad Jennings, Trey Mason, Marshawn Lynch, and Pierre Thomas, although Pierre Thomas is now out a couple weeks. Still some pretty good running backs there, although there's some injury questions on Jennings and Trey Mason. How much is he going to produce? But still, more running backs than most of us have. Next up, DK's Kongs. 3 and 4 DK's Kongs. Running back 2, right now it's not real good. They're running back of any sort, really. My Bradshaw's pretty good, but he's probably more of a running back 2. Doug Martin, Steven Jackson are the number 2s, so there could be some help there. And also the flex, Wes Welker, who maybe now is starting to pick it up. He did actually have a touchdown this week. Depth, he does have some receivers: Andre Johnson, Deshaun Jackson, Roddy White, and Wes Welker. So some pretty good wide receiver 2s on his team. Team LBM, struggling at 2 and 5 right now. He needs a running back. His starters are Jeremy Hill, Andre Williams, and Bernard Pierce. Some combination of those 3 start for him. Depth, he does have some receivers: Gronk, Brandon LaFell, Brandon Marshall, Antonio Gates, Josh Gordon, come week 12, I believe it is, Doug Baldwin, and Jimmy Graham. So some injuries on Graham, but otherwise a very good receiving core from Team LBM. Dino's Black Dingles are up next. Running back 2, probably a need with Fred Jackson being hurt. Darren McFadden not hurt at the time, but that's right around the corner. And James Starks also hurt, but probably more flex guys there, especially with Jackson being out. Wide receiver 2, James Jones, Fitzgerald, Jason Witten, Vernon Davis, Larry Donnell, guys who are more wide receiver 3 flexes, and that is his depth. And excuse me for a second here, I did make one mistake, kind of looking at the playoff chances of these teams and long-term potential. So going back to Bites for a second, playoffs I would say are all but guaranteed, and a very good chance at the Super Bowl in my opinion this year for Bites' Badgers, or at least to make a big run in the playoffs. DK's Kongs, playoff outlook, probably around 30-40%. Long-term playoff potential, probably not the highest, but you never know. It is fantasy football. Team LBM, low playoff chances, like probably right around 2%, 2 to 5%. Long-term playoff potential, not terribly good, unless those running backs take over. Dino's Black Dingos, playoff potential, probably around 65%. Long-term playoff potential, probably contingent on Arian Foster staying healthy and Fred Jackson getting healthy. In Rodgers We Trust is up next. Needs a running back 2. Right now it's the Carolina running backs. That's all he has. That's scary. And that's Stewart and Williams. Depth, he does have some receivers. Emmanuel Sanders, Julian Edelman, Steve Smith Sr., Anquan Bolden, and Robinson for the Jaguars. Playoff potential, pretty good, about 70%. Long-term playoff potential, not bad, not bad. DeMarco Murray really helps there. AJ Green getting healthy will be big. Yeah, I forgot him on there. AJ Green is also one of the receivers, so yeah, that'll be a big help when he comes back. But yeah, he'll need to possibly address that running back situation and then go from there. But pretty good long-term playoff potential. Finally, we have the Bone Storm. Needs a running back 1. He's got some pretty good running back 2s, and Ellington's borderline 1. Joey Bell, Justin Forsett, who doesn't score touchdowns, that's kind of keeping him down. Bell with Reggie Bush there is definitely more of a flex. Depth, he does have some receivers: Demaryius Thomas, Dez Bryant, Pierre Garcon, Keenan Allen, Eric Decker, Greg Olsen, and Martellus Bennett. And in quarterbacks, Brady's been playing well in Cutler, so he gives himself some depth there. Playoff potential, probably in that 50%, 50 to 60% range. If he does make the playoffs, he could be dangerous in a pretty deep team. And with Demaryius Thomas having the ability to really go off, is always nice to have. So there we have that. Also, since the BCS rankings are being released tonight, as well as the World Series, go Royals, we will take a look at our first ever Fantasy Championship Series rankings. These were very scientific, based on records, points, and also a vote in the Weber household here. There's 5 votes: Glenn, Judy, Emma, Jenna, and myself. One of the votes, there really was not that many votes cast, but we'll see maybe in the weeks to come that'll change. So we'll break out the first ever fantasy rankings here on the morning after. FCS rankings, see Bites' Badgers check in at number 1 this week. They are number 1 across the board. Bernie's Bruisers at number 2 on their 5-game winning streak. Tied for 3rd are Scott's Horn Dogs, and in Rogers We Trust. Number 5 comes in as the Bone Storm. So those are the teams right now we're feeling, may have, ways to go. They could make not a ways to go, but they could make a big dent in the playoffs. Now we'll take a look at the teams that are more on the fringe of the playoffs, although that would be the Bone Storm as well, because they are technically out of it right now. But we'll go ahead and take a look here. Dino's Black Dingoes coming at number 6. They were knocked down a little bit due to injuries on the team. Griff's Gargoyles at 7. Chris's Cardinals at 8. Chet's Garbage Men and DK's Kongs at 9. Tied for 9, and also receiving votes in the poll were the Donkeys and Team LBM. Chet's Garbage Man is probably wondering, what the heck, why am I that low? Point-wise, not that high. Also, the eye test isn't that high for the... what are you doing, Glenn? On the team. But Andrew Luck does make up for a lot of areas that are lacking on the team, and Eddie Lacy is maybe coming around now, especially with Stark's injury. So, maybe next week, the Garbage Men will move up in the ranking. So, speaking of next week, we'll take a look at the matchups on tap, and then we will say goodbye. So, matchups next week. Bruisers taking on In Rogers We Trust is the marquee matchup, battle of 5 and 2s. And also this week, we saw the Badgers take on the Cardinals in a rematch of Super Bowl 19. Cardinals trying to fight for their playoff lives, and the Badgers trying to maintain their dominance this year. So that's the week that was here. Thanks everybody for tuning in, and have a good fantasy week, and we'll see you next week. Bye.